So good morning, everyone. I can't believe I'm looking out at a place that still has seats for you all to sit. All right, let's see if this works. We sort of changed the plan this morning in terms of where the computer was going to be and everything else, so we will start here. What I wanted to do this morning, and it really will be a few minutes because we want to get the first panel up here and get them presenting on time and stay on time. The schedule this morning is extremely tight, so we do appreciate everyone who is able to stay on time. And there are plenty of seats down here in case any of you want to come over and sit down, and they're very comfortable seats. Not that easy to get in and out of, but they are comfortable. So what I wanted to do today is just to sort of set the stage for what we've been terming a seismic shift. Now, given the hurricanes and tornadoes we've been hearing about, and having lived through a couple of major earthquakes back in California when we lived there, you think of earthquakes, and so when you think seismic shift, you think about the plate tectonic shift that happens and you have an earthquake. But what happens there is that when they shift, and while there's rumblings and damage, they sort of stay. Whereas with the hurricanes and the tornadoes that we see, I mean, those things move on, again, creating a lot of damage. What we hope is that the seismic shift that's going on in education technology, first of all, I do believe it's not creating damage, but it is a shift, and those shifts that are fundamental that are going to probably remain no matter what happens. There's a lot that's happening right now, and I sort of look at, because of our membership, we look at four sort of these communities. One is the whole world of technology, and it's the device makers and OS makers, et cetera. There's the education institutions, which have been going, on a lot of changes themselves. The financial firms, and particularly this year, there's just, as we've seen growing last year, a great deal of interest in that. I was at the investor breakfast this morning, and Kevin mentioned that we have, I think, passed the $1 billion mark of investment in ed tech companies this year. And that's more than last year, and that was more than the year before. So there is that growth and what I call financial shift going on. And then, of course, the education companies, all of you that are working hard to create the products that work. So what we hear about, and more each day, is mobile, and of course with that global. But for mobile, it's really been a shift that's been occurring for 40, 50 years. Having taught with IBM 360s, mainframe machines, and what we've seen over the decades is technology has gotten smaller, faster, cheaper, and then smaller, faster, cheaper, and then things that we can now fit in a pocket that used to take rooms. With that, of course, the global environment. With that, the chance to do online learning, whether it's an APU or many of the different online courses, schools, providers that are happening. A lot of the schools now are moving towards blended. And again, I think that's a shift that is going to remain. I think it's going to be more of the same. MOOCs are probably the latest of the buzz. A couple of weeks ago, I was at EDUCAUSE in Denver, and the most heavily attended was the Coursera, University of Maryland. It was a featured presentation, standing room only, in the largest space they could find in the Denver Convention Center. And the whole story of how they are working together to produce these online courses, it's all very untested. It's all, they will say, we don't know yet if there is a financial model that's going to be sustainable. We don't know a lot of things. We just know that this is something that we need to do. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. The other is, of course, with that customizable content, and these all blend together. I've listed them as bullet points, but they all relate heavily to each other, and of course affecting a lot of our companies' free content. Now, whether that's a freemium model or totally open and free, or eventually they'll change a business model to become sustainable, we don't know. But the customizable is there, and it's affecting what we call personalized learning. whether it is what we used to think of as individualized learning. It's more than that. We know that because we have the infrastructure to actually personalize some of that learning. And with it, because of, again, the world of technology, be it Facebook or some of the others, the whole aspect of social learning. A lot of the course developers and major content providers, particularly in higher ed and those connected to the LMS world, are building in social learning aspects to their products and services. And I think we'll see that stay the same. We know that we need some seismic change in education. The students are disengaged, but their expectations are rising. Again, at EDUCAUSE, one of the key things in a lot of the presentations that I heard from the universities was that while their budgets were cut extremely over the last few years, student expectations of what they could do online were rising. And they're really in crosshairs because they don't have the budget to hire the right people or implement the right things. The population, again, is much more diverse, whether it's minority students in PK-12 or in higher ed. The number of students that come in and have to take, we would call them remedial courses in PK-12. They are, of course, called developmental courses in higher ed. But it's very diverse. A lot of the population of colleges now, the average age keeps continuing to rise because people are going back after many years. And the jobs are much more competitive. A lot of the students haven't quite figured out that some of the degrees that they are getting are not the degrees that are going to get them a job. One of the things that I heard at a dinner recently was that there was something like 3 times more art history degrees granted this last year than in computer science. And there's also, it's the same reflection, it's the same thing for the number of AP courses in high schools. So what's happened is that we've created this cycle of a lack of STEM-related jobs, which are affecting what our companies can produce. So what I'm hoping for in terms of seismic change is some effects that we will see more engaged students, whether it's the use of technology applied in the right way, or that they have some realistic expectations about what they can do with the skills and the concepts that they've learned, that we can use diversity that's coming in either K-12 or higher ed or adult or corporate training as an opportunity for the companies in this audience to create some really great products and services that take those into account, and to help those that need to be more employable that way. Now, we came up with a vision 5-6 years ago, and the education division wanted to make sure that students have access to a teaching and learning environment that helps both global competitiveness and the world of innovation. We created the vision, we did a pilot survey in 2008, and then have been running more surveys and getting more and more responses each year. This is a benchmarking device that K-12 and higher ed institutions, be they classroom teachers or campus directors, anyone that represents an education institution. And of the last 3 years, because 5 years worth of data is too difficult to show, we have 5 technology measures that we've been looking at, and they rank where they are, and they ping themselves in terms of what uses they make of technology. It's translated to a score, and on a score of sort of 1 to 4, whether it's enterprise support, 21st century tools, anytime, anywhere access, differentiated learning, and assessment tools, where technology really supports what their goals are all about. You can see that from 2010 to 2012, not much of a shift. 1% forward, 1% back, or 1 or 2%, depending on the year, depending on the situation. The one that goes farthest out, 385, 375, that's where they want to be. That's where they told us this last year. They really want to be there, so that's good news. But it's not where they're at. Part of the problem in talking to some of the survey responders is that each year they mark themselves where they think they are, The problem is where they could be does keep moving out on them. So while they think they've made more progress than just say a 1/10 of a point, a 100th of a point here, it's really not something that they can show. The same thing is true in post-secondary. I just showed you the PK-12 ones. Each of these scores are just a little bit further along. I think higher ed tends to think they're further along than K-12, but also when it came to using, for example, one-to-one computing, they were requiring kids to get their laptops or bring computers to class years ago. 10 years ago, at EDUCAUSE, the most popular sessions were wiring your campus for wireless. I mean, we're thinking about this 10 years ago. So, and they've been dealing with kids bringing their mobile devices in for some number of years. K-12 now with BYOD, bring your own device, they're struggling with that. But I think it's going to happen because that's what parents, students want. Again, the same kind of numbers, same lack of major shifts, but we'll hope that it can happen. The problem is we still have state budget shortfalls. And this is a slide from Dr. Richard Sims last year from the NEA Economist. We've had him back now a couple of times, and he gives usually a sobering presentation of what's going to be happening in terms of budgets in the schools. And in this case, it was, you can see a shift. It's not going in the right direction fast enough, but at least it's going in the right direction, and we'll see. I mean, you know that the problem with getting property taxes into the schools based on previous year's collections, based on previous year's assessments, it's going to take a while to catch up. But this is one of his slides. I don't think things have changed in that year, unfortunately. So what we're wondering is whether or not the EdTech spending is going to change. They are spending, they're shifting some of their dollars from printed materials, perhaps, to digital materials. And because they're not getting more money, it is a shift of how they're spending their money. So we're looking at that change. But this year, according to what John has been finding in the report and the information we've received, 3.5%. Now, $7.5 and $7.77 billion is a lot of money. But it doesn't go that far when you're dealing with the number of students and schools that we have. We know, as he mentioned, that instructional support, platforms administration went up. And that's a good thing, because out of all of those thousands of wonderful apps you can get on your mobile devices, they're great apps for something very specific, but they don't fit into an entire school's ecosystem, their infrastructure, the classroom, as well as they should. That's going to take some work. So if they're spending it on platforms and administration, I think we'll see that happen. We looked at innovation as well, and we've been running this program now, the Innovation Incubator Program, for 11 cycles. This year we had again about 75 or close to 80, I think, presentations. And we reviewed those. They worked with us to prepare. They actually did some online presentations. Our companies reviewed them, so we went from that 75 or so down to 12. 12 presented yesterday, and then 6, the top 6 that were rated for most innovative and most likely to succeed, combined scores and their means and percentages, and you name it. Lindsay, with her mathematical prowess, figured out a very, very fair way to do this. So the ones that you're going to be hearing from in just a few minutes are those 6. You will vote again after the 6 for the most innovative and likely to succeed, and we'll take those scores and we'll have plaques and awards ready for them at the closing reception right outside in the gallery. These are the winners from most innovative and most likely to succeed, Filament Games and Language Express at our most recent cycle, which was at the EdTech Industry Summit. For those of you in the audience who are thinking about applying, we will be opening in January, it's a J month, January for our next round of applications. So if you have a great new product or service and want to try this, it's a great way to get exposure. So we're not sure what's going to happen with some of this fiscal shift, but we can hope. And very, very clearly, what we do know is that education is becoming more global. Part of it is the online learning. MOOCs, for example, there are teachers now, I'm reading the teacher blogs, they're creating their own courses, and first it's for their students. Then they open it up. And rather than teaching 20, 25 in a class, they're teaching 200, 2,000 from all over the world. Number one, that does a great deal for who they are and what they are. They are reaching more people, and that's the reason that they're teaching to begin with. So there's something in it for the educators. And it's all about the communication and collaboration. Computing used to be for math and science types. We used to program, and that's all we did. It's different. We have a totally different use of computers. We know that learning is happening outside the classrooms more and more. And education reform has been with us since I can remember, starting in the 60s. I mean, it was the calculator movement and the math lab movement, and oh, remember the metric system? We were going to shift to the metric system. All of these reforms would come and go, and some of them did go. But I think that the changes that are happening because of technology use in education is here, and it's just going to continue shifting. I also, and I'll put a word in for the task force that we had on communication in general, that as much as we believe in technology and love technology and will continue to use technology more and more, it's not going to replace teachers and instructors. They may do slightly different things, but it's not going to replace them. Seismic changes that I want, with or without technology, but I think technology can help. We have to lessen our dropout rate. The amount of money, the amount of numbers of apps, the amount of infrastructure we build, the surveys we do, everything won't matter if we continue to have dropouts that are not prepared to be good citizens. And personally speaking, as an ex-math teacher and married to an ex-science teacher, please, I mean, we've got to get the interest in these courses if we want to remain competitive and innovative in the U.S. Always want more funding for education, and I don't know where and how much more Mark can do on this, but we are always at SIIA about trying to convince folks, whether it be at the state level or the federal level, that more funding is needed. So we'll continue to do that. And lastly, any seismic shift that shows more success by users for education technology is what I want for a seismic change. Thank you. Okay, let's get up the next panel. Chad Johnson and some panelists. We're going to hear from the VCs, and I will try and get your slides up. Chad? Yeah.